A donkey's eyes go wide on a narrow desert path. Its ears flatten. Its whole body trembles at something on the road that its rider cannot see at all. In the entire Bible, only one animal ever speaks human words to correct a person. Not a lion, not a serpent. A donkey. And the man riding it was supposed to be the one who could see what others could not. Almost everyone who knows the Bible has heard the name Balaam. Almost no one remembers that he was not an Israelite prophet at all. Balaam was a professional diviner for hire, based far to the northeast on the Euphrates, famous across the ancient world for one specific skill: whoever he blessed was blessed, and whoever he cursed stayed cursed. That reputation reached the ears of a terrified king named Balak, ruler of Moab, who watched an enormous foreign nation camp on his border after crushing every army sent against it. His own scouts told him plainly that this people covered the land like a swarm, and that nothing his own soldiers could do would stop them. Balak could not defeat this nation with swords. So he sent his messengers north with silver in their hands, to hire the one man whose words alone were said to defeat armies. God told Balaam plainly, "Do not go, this people are blessed." Balaam refused the first envoys. But when a second, grander embassy arrived, God gave him a strange permission, and a warning he did not take seriously enough. So the next morning, Balaam saddled his own donkey and set out. The road south ran through empty country, and Balaam rode it with 2 servants, thinking only of the fortune waiting for him in Moab. Then, in the middle of the path, something stepped into view. A figure with a drawn sword, blocking the entire road entirely, filling it from one edge to the other. Balaam noticed nothing at all. He rode on as if the road ahead of him were completely empty. But the donkey saw it instantly. It bolted off the road into a field, and Balaam, furious at the animal for no reason he understood, struck it to force it back onto the path. The figure moved ahead and waited again, this time on a path so narrow that stone walls pressed in on both sides, a vineyard wall to the left, bare rock to the right. The donkey saw the sword again, and this time it had nowhere to run. It pressed hard against the wall, crushing its rider's foot against the stone. Balaam struck it a second time, angrier than before. A third time, the figure moved ahead to a place with no room to turn at all, right or left. And this time, the donkey simply lay down in the middle of the road, and would not move. Balaam raised his stick a third time, blind with rage at an animal that had served him faithfully for years and had never once behaved this way before. And then, before the blow could land, the donkey spoke. "What have I done to you," it said, "that you have struck me these 3 times? A beast of burden, arguing with the man who owned it, as calmly as any servant would." Balaam answered it, not with shock at a talking animal, but with plain fury, as if this were an argument he was already losing. "You have made a fool of me. If I had a sword, I would kill you right now." The donkey answered again, "Am I not the donkey you have ridden all your life? Have I ever treated you this way before?" And Balaam, still not understanding what was happening, said simply, "No." It was only then, in the middle of arguing with his own animal, that something else happened. Balaam's eyes were opened, and he finally saw what the donkey had seen 3 times over. A figure of light stood in the road, sword drawn, filling the whole path from wall to wall. Balaam fell face down in the dust before it, all his earlier confidence gone in an instant. The figure spoke. 3 times the donkey had turned aside to save him, and 3 times Balaam had beaten it for doing exactly the right thing. Had the donkey not turned away, the sword would have already fallen on the rider, not the animal. A man famous across nations for seeing what others could not had needed a beast of burden to open his eyes for him. Balaam confessed his fault at once and offered to turn back. But the answer he received was not permission to go home. It was permission to continue, on one condition: he could go, but he could only ever say the words he was given to say. So Balaam rode on toward Moab, carrying a warning he now understood far too late, and a king waiting eagerly on the other side of the border for a curse. King Balak met him at the border personally, impatient and relieved, and led him at once up into the high places overlooking the great camp below, so the curse could begin. Almost everyone assumes Balaam's story ends with the talking donkey. It does not. What happened next on that mountain is stranger still. 7 altars were built. 7 bulls and 7 rams were offered. Everything was prepared exactly as a professional curse required. Balaam opened his mouth to speak the words Balak was paying for. And blessing came out instead, not a curse. A declaration that this people could not be cursed at all, because no one can curse what a greater power has already blessed. Balak was furious, certain his diviner had simply picked the wrong hilltop. He rushed Balaam to a second location, hoping a different view of the camp would change the outcome. The second attempt produced the same result. Blessing, stronger than before. Balak, now desperate, dragged him to a third and final high place, certain that surely this time would be different. A third time, Balaam opened his mouth over the camp of the very nation he had been paid to destroy. And a third time, only blessing came out, this time reaching further than before, describing a king and a kingdom still generations away from being born, a promise stretching far past anything happening on that mountain that day. A star will come out of Jacob, he said, a scepter will rise out of Israel. Words about a king, spoken by a hired curse caller who had been trying, 3 separate times, to say the opposite. Balak's fury finally broke. He struck his hands together and sent Balaam home unpaid, cursing the very silver he had once offered him. Most retellings stop right here, with a defeated king and an honest prophet who did the right thing in the end. But scripture itself does not let Balaam off that easily. Because later in the same story, Israel's men begin worshipping foreign gods at a place called Baal-Peor, seduced into it by the women of Moab and Midian, a disaster that cost thousands of lives in the plague that followed. And later still, a single verse quietly names the man behind that plan. It was Balaam who had advised it, unable to curse Israel directly, so he found another way to bring them down. The man who spoke a genuine, unwilling prophecy of blessing on a mountaintop went home and sold his services to bring about the opposite by other means. He is remembered in later scripture not as a hero, but as a warning about greed disguised as prophecy. For centuries, skeptics treated this entire account as pure legend, a colorful old story with no trace outside the Bible's own pages, and no reason to think a diviner named Balaam ever existed at all. Then, in 1967, at a site called Deir Alla in the Jordan Valley, archaeologists uncovered fragments of plaster that had fallen from a wall, shattered into hundreds of pieces on the floor of an old building, covered in ancient ink, describing visions received by a man named Balaam, son of Beor. The text was not from the Bible. It was not written by Israelites at all. It came from people who lived east of the Jordan River centuries later, who remembered this same man as a famous seer of the gods, entirely independent of scripture. A name that skeptics had assumed was pure invention turned out to be remembered, on its own, by people who had every reason to know nothing about the Bible's version of the story. It does not prove every detail of the donkey, the sword, or the mountain, but it means the man at the center of this strange story was not invented for it. Someone, somewhere outside Israel, already knew his name and his reputation. That discovery sits quietly at the edge of a story most people think they already know in full. Consider how strange the actual shape of this account really is. God does not speak first to the famous prophet. He speaks first to the animal that carries him. Balaam is a professional, trained, respected, hired across borders for his gift. And in this story, he is consistently the last one to understand what is actually happening around him. The donkey sees the danger before he does. The donkey speaks sense before he does. Even Balak, a foreign king with no covenant and no prophetic gift at all, grasps what is happening faster than the man he hired. There is a real reason this ordering matters. Scripture keeps returning to a single, uncomfortable pattern. The people who are supposed to see the clearest are often the last to see anything at all. Balaam's blindness was never really about his eyes. He could recite the right rituals, use the right holy words, even hear directly from God, and still walk straight past the danger standing in the road in front of him. That is the deeper current running underneath a story that looks, on the surface, like comic relief with a talking animal. It also explains why this account sits inside a much larger pattern across Scripture, where God repeatedly speaks through the most unlikely, least official voice available. A shepherd boy corrects a king's advisors. A poor widow's small offering outweighs the wealth of the rich. And here, a beast of burden outperforms a famous prophet at recognizing the presence of God on an open road. It is a pattern designed to humble exactly the kind of confidence Balaam carried into their journey, the confidence of someone certain his own skill made him the one who understood the situation. So return to that narrow road for a moment. 3 times a sword blocked the path. 3 times the donkey turned aside to save a man who could not see the danger at all. 3 times he struck the one creature actually protecting him. And only after he had exhausted every ounce of his own certainty did his eyes finally open. That is the real shape of the mountain scenes too. 3 altars, 3 attempts to force a curse out of a mouth that had already been claimed for something else, and 3 times, only blessing came out instead. The number 3 runs through this entire account like a thread, 3 strikes on the road, 3 altars on the mountain, 3 refusals to be turned toward destruction, whether the destruction was aimed at the donkey or at Israel itself. And through all of it, the man in the center kept insisting he understood exactly what was happening, right up until the moment his own animal proved him wrong. There is a reason later biblical writers, in Peter's letters and in the book of Jude, single out Balaam by name as the model of a specific kind of failure, someone who knew the truth clearly, spoke it under pressure when he had no choice, and still loved the reward more than the truth itself. The way of Balaam became, centuries later, a byword for exactly one thing: a gifted man who saw the road clearly enough, and chose the money on the other end of it anyway. That is what makes his final act, back at Baal-Peor, so much darker than a simple footnote. He could not bring himself to curse Israel with words. So he found a way to curse them without saying a single word Balak could be blamed for. The plague that followed at Baal-Peor is remembered in Scripture as one of the costliest failures in the entire wilderness generation, claiming thousands of lives before it was finally stopped, and its architect was never the enemy king at all. Balaam himself does not escape the story either. He is later killed in the very war his own advice provoked, caught on the wrong side of the people he had once, however unwillingly, blessed. So the man remembered for one talking donkey is also, more quietly, remembered as a cautionary tale about a gift that outlasted its owner's integrity. And yet the story does not let him have the final word either. The blessing he was forced to speak on that mountain stood regardless of what he did with the rest of his life. A star will come out of Jacob was not undone by the greed of the man who said it. The words were never really his to take back. That may be the strangest lesson tucked inside this account, that truth can pass through an unwilling, even corrupt messenger, and still arrive completely intact on the other side. A donkey saw what a prophet could not. A foreign king grasped the weight of a blessing faster than the man being paid to undo it. And a plaster wall in Jordan, buried for nearly 3,000 years, quietly confirmed that this strange, uncomfortable man really did exist. None of it required Balaam to be wise. It only required him, 3 times, to be wrong, and something humbler than him, standing in the road, to be right. The sword is long gone from that road. The 7 altars have crumbled into the same hillside dust, but the pattern they left behind has never really left at all. It is still true that the loudest confidence in the room is not the same thing as sight. It is still true that the humblest voice nearby is sometimes the only one actually seeing clearly. Somewhere between a sword no one else could see and a blessing no one else wanted spoken, a donkey said more in one sentence than its famous rider had managed in his entire career. See